it's amazing that we've been a species for 300,000 years and we've just worked out we need to tape our mouth shut at night time, isn't it? But like many of these subject areas, it's kind of founded in science, but then extrapolated to more broad usage that may not be that scientific. But just for, I guess, people that don't know what we're talking about, it's the literal taping shut of your mouth when you sleep. So as you sleep. And this is kind of done in two ways. It can be done through the center of the mouth or with two bits of tape either side. And it's based on the knowledge that nasal breathing, so breathing through your nose, has its advantages over breathing through your mouth. So nasal breathing is important for, it warms the air, it removes particles, so it filters the air. It then has an immune function because of the immune cells that are in your nasal passage. So therefore it has a positive effect on immunity. Not opening your mouth as well has an impact on your oral health. So the bacterial species that can propagate when you're breathing through your mouth is an oral component. Nasal breathing as well, we know through things like meditation, and when you expel the air slowly through your nose, it actually can calm you down. So it has some neuropsychiatric or neuropsychological components to it. And also, if you think about when you're blowing a balloon up, if there's a hole in that balloon, the balloon doesn't hold the pressure. So actually, when you think about you've got your mouth closed and you're breathing through your nose, actually that increased pressure can open up your airways, so it can improve ventilation. So that's the body of work that has been used to then justify, therefore, tape your mouth up at night.
And that's the main time that people are using it, is when they go to sleep, yes. Right?
For sure, yeah, absolutely.
Because I've also sort of read a little bit around it in terms of like performance benefits for exercise. I've certainly seen people on social media taping their mouth and going for a run and that type of thing. But it seems that the majority of people who are exploring this are doing it as part of a nighttime routine.
Yes, but that can have broader, obviously, health implications. I think there's the fact that so we know that a good night's sleep has impacts on risk of illness as well as performance benefits. So again, there's that broad expansion into, because you're having a slightly better night's sleep, this can improve cardiovascular outcomes, or it can improve weight loss, or it can improve sporting outcomes. So you have that broad statement of, that's why you do it.
So on statements, I do have a quote for you, which I sort of stumbled across from Tim.
It's not mine, is it? No.
No, not yet. So Tim Spector in the Times at the start of October, he's sort of quoted saying, "I've taped my mouth a few times. Everyone needs to tape their mouth because you'll have a better night's sleep. I've done it a few nights. I even offered to tape my wife's mouth for her, but she refused." I think we'll explore the first half of that quote rather than the second half.
And there's lots to unpack in that second half, isn't there?
Yeah. So we'll look at that. So, we've got people like Tim Spector, but also other people like Huberman who've kind of been talking about mouth taping and kind of the perceived benefits of it. So, I mean, in your sort of like understanding, are you on board? Do you share their view, I guess?
So I picked up the word, he said everyone needs to tape, I guess, and I think that's I think when you primarily evaluate a method, so let's just when you primarily evaluate a method, you've got to look at the good reviews, the good meta-analysis, the extensive trials, the trials that are done in multiple populations, and the trials that are done well. I have not found any for mouth taping, so on that basis, I cannot condone the statement that everyone should be taping their mouths at all. I just fundamentally disagree with that statement.
So there's a lack of academic evidence behind this currently.
For sure. Yeah, it's from what I've looked at. So I knew we were talking about this today. I had a look and I found no. So if you think about, like, just off the top of my head, like oat bran for reducing cholesterol, there'll be many studies of which a meta-analysis or several meta-analyses will be done where they show that all these different populations that have taken oat bran, some of these will be very well controlled trials, some less so. A lot of these meta-analyses will then select for the best trials when doing their analysis, and this shows that all of those studies, or the great majority of those studies, have shown a reduction in, for example, LDL cholesterol. Nothing exists like that for mouth tape. Nothing.
Okay. So it's quite interesting then that there's so many advocates for it, despite this lack of evidence currently.
And again, I think you get this a lot in the health space, that you'll have, and I think the names you've mentioned do this a reasonable amount of the time, that there'll be a plausible scientific process or mechanism that describes how a positive or negative process can happen in your body. And then they go on and layer on, therefore, this will have an effect. Now, that for me as a scientist is a great hypothesis. Then you go run the studies, and then you go prove it's correct. I think what's happening at the moment is, and again, we're living in a world where there's a need for content, quite a lot. We are maybe adding to this problem, and you therefore are jumping the gun on what is the normal and bona fide process of how you evaluate an intervention. And I think they've shot from the hip, if we need any more idioms in this.
So, I mean, do you perceive any benefits to this at all then?
Okay, so again, looking through the literature, so going back to, so what you've got here is something that claims to improve ventilation, improve sleep, and improve filtration and immunity. So for the studies that exist at the moment, the first one they looked at, so I think there's one thing we need to highlight as well. So if this was a very nascent topic, i.e. people only started doing the last year, you could be, okay, well, actually the research is not out there. There's been studies for the last 2 decades on mouth taping, so it's not new in the context of interventions for certain conditions. So I think there's one for looking at asthma, which I think was at least a decade ago. Because obviously you get increased filtration when breathing through your nose. The hypothesis was for people with hypersensitive airways, this could actually improve their symptomatic asthma, and there was no examples of that occurring in that paper. Again, this is a paper with, I think, about 60 participants. With research as well, you very often don't get negative data published because it's not seen as interesting. So at the moment, I've only found the one paper on asthma. It was negative. Does that mean there's been lots of other studies that were so negative and people have just refrained from publishing them? Or that study has shut down asthma science with mouth taping and actually there's a benefit? I don't know. But as we sit here today, we've just got to look at the data in front of us, and it had no effect on symptomatic asthma. Now, more into the broad realm of sleep. So again, for such a prolifically talked about subject over the last year, I was expecting lots of different studies, maybe conflicting data, and there's not a great deal actually. The papers are in the tens just for mouth taping in general. I think the biggest positive seemed to be in snoring. So again, there's a lot of cause and consequences on snoring, but if you think about if you're increasing pressure in the airways, snoring where you get the sort of relaxation of the muscles and vibration, actually there could be a positive impact on snoring. So what happens is, I think in the one study I looked at, I think it was a 2/3 reduction in snoring interventions, and then snoring episodes, and that of course can have a big effect on not only your sleep, but anyone within a certain radius of your sleep as well. So there's positive effects on snoring. Now, in terms of sleep in general, the researchers looked at sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is these events where you have reduced oxygen intake, or even you can stop breathing for moments during the night, and it can wake you up. It can break up your the sleep architecture. So that's when you go from REM to non-REM sleep. So the natural sleep cycle, so you get the best rest possible. And there was when you have sort of modest or sort of low sort of impact sleep apnea, there did seem to be some effect of keeping the mouth closed during sleeping. But as the sleep apnea become more pathogenic, actually it had more of a negative effect. So just to put this in perspective, they also looked at if you're a mouth breather, if you're a nasal breather, or if you're a mouth breather partially, or if you're an extensive mouth breather. So for the people who were nasal breathers or were breathing through their mouth a little bit, it did have a positive impact on ventilation. But as you went more into the people that were breathing extensively through their mouths, actually it didn't have that benefit at all, and it actually seemed to reduce ventilation. And I think a lot of, and you see this with the concepts of why it should be a positive thing, it's based on the interpretation of the science that the shutting of the mouth is the opening of the mouth is causative of all the problems. Now we know with obstructive sleep apnea, enlarged adenoids can be a problem. Obesity is a problem. With central sleep apnea, this can be due to cardiovascular complaints, issues with the heart, motor neuron disease, lots of other different conditions. So actually, the fact you're having that sleep apnea is not mouth breathing is not the reason. Actually, mouth breathing could be a symptom of a broad spectrum of different conditions. So I think the take home from that is if you don't really need the mouth taping, it has a positive impact on ventilation. But actually the people who would benefit from maybe some improvement in ventilation, it doesn't seem to have the effect.
And also seems to carry some degree of risk by the sound of it as well.
And I think that, again, going back to that, and maybe I'm being a little unfair here because this is a quote and we all get misquoted from time to time, but he said everyone should be doing it. I just disagree with that statement fundamentally.
Yeah, so, and I guess that was what I was wondering. So, if we're going to take it from everyone should do it to, this may be beneficial for some people, how do we sort of set that criteria? If we were to say, this percentage of the population it might be beneficial for, who are those individuals?
Yeah, I guess time for our sort of conflict of interest statement here. So what we kind of do at FitnessGenes is we evaluate someone's biology and then we go, okay, say someone's got an issue with sleeping or there's an increased risk of something. We go, what are the interventions? So of course, mouth taping was of interest to us. And what we do is we evaluate someone's holistic biology and then we understand lots of different moving parts and components. So when thinking, so mouth taping for me, like if you've got significant obstructive reasons, so if you're obese, which is 30% of the population in some cases, I would not be advising it. If you can be very healthy but be drinking one evening or taking sedatives, do not do it those days. People with sleep apneas, like central, and I think we're getting close to 10%. So there's 10% of the population there, who shouldn't be taking it. With other comorbidities like cardiovascular problems as well, you should not be doing it either. And that's really when you start getting over 50, you should really think about it in more broad terms of what health conditions you might have. And I know on the individual basis, someone could come around and go, okay, well, I'm 50, I'm lifting weights, I'm really working hard, I sleep really well, but I just want the extra bit of energy throughout the day. I appreciate that statement, and that on an individual case, that's why personalisation is really important. That case, it might be something they can use. But generally, and a clinician will think about this in terms of, what population do you sit in, and if you're the drinker, the smoker, the person with more extreme sleep apnea, if you're overweight, if you have diabetes, if you have cardiovascular issues, they would say no. So again, when we're extrapolating that everyone should take it, back of a cigarette packet calculation is you're looking at 10 to 20% in the pot, that then you'd probably have some of the criteria to evaluate them further. But again, I'll just like to point it out, I'm not recommending anyone does this. I think this is how I would evaluate from what I've seen in the literature, and also what I know more broadly from understanding someone's risks within the disease space, the group of individuals that may benefit from it.
Okay, so that group of individuals are people that are generally fit, they don't have these comorbidities, and so that's a relatively small percentage of the population. Mm-hmm. Because I was reading, there's a Men's Health article of Adam Burgess, who's a Team GB canoeist, won silver in Paris. So he's obviously like a high performance individual, very fit, and he's said that mouth taping has benefited his sleep and his performance. So there are people, and also people who produce content that we've mentioned as well, who do kind of perceive this benefit. So is this benefit physiological? Is there something else going on? How do we explain that?
I think this is an interesting point, actually, because when you're reading the studies, you think, okay, well, what's the best control of a study? Now, we've had members of our team trying it out, and they've done it for a month, and what they said was, it's quite an intense experience. And when you're trying to control in a study, so you think about, you've got two pills, and one's the intervention and one's the placebo, the control. Like you get two people, you give them the same plastic cup, they have the same process of taking the pill, and they go and do their thing, and you measure something within a week or two. Now, what is the control for taping your mouth together? Because it's quite an intense thing to do, and so therefore it's going to have quite a psychological impact on you. The second point is, if you think about your sleep, the process of sleeping, if you okay, well, I'm going to bed now, I'm going to tape my mouth. There is a creation of a sleep hygiene protocol. There's a behavioural protocol. You are then taping your mouth, and then there's the ability to fixate on the fact you have tape. So some people struggle to sleep because they've got lots of thoughts running through their heads. You're actually creating a very different sleep environment that's not due to the ventilation and the fact you're breathing through your nose, but you've just created a process. Now, of course, so one of the studies I looked at, it was looking at people who were very receptive to mouth taping. Now, if you don't really like the idea of it, it's probably going to have a negative effect. So actually there's the whole, how do you, and this is maybe why there's not that many good studies out there, that how do you design a well-controlled trial for taping your mouth up? And as I sit here this moment, I'm not quite sure how to do that, because it's very, you can't blind it to the person who's been studied. You can blind the data to the scientists, because you'll get all the analytics that come through from the wearables or the other devices, and we don't know which ones have had mouth tape on because they're in a different room. But for the individual that's getting the intervention, it's very difficult to have a control group. So actually what you might have here is just an overlaying of process into your evening routine. Now, we did this, so we actually manufactured a sleep supplement via our data sets with Walgreens Boots Alliance, and to do the study we had to put everyone in exactly the same process, where they switched devices off, they went to bed, they went through exactly the same process, and then there's the taking of the pill, because we showed in the data that actually the presence of the sleep hygiene in itself was efficacious. Then the intervention was additionally efficacious. So we know that can have an impact. So and I've not seen any of those controls sitting in the studies at the minute. But back to kind of your position of people are having a benefit. I'm agnostic to it. I think there could be benefits, but these benefits are to a small population.
So we were talking about habit forming. And the fact that this just could become part of a sort of like, I guess, a nighttime ritual that people go through to prepare themselves for bed. I guess when you kind of bring that up, if it is due to having that process in place, are there other things that people could be doing that is perhaps less intensive than blocking your airways?
Well, again, yeah, it's the building of good sleep routines. I think it's very important. You can, and as well, there's practicing mouth closing exercises throughout the day now. I think you're probably getting to the stage now where you want me to close my mouth, but yeah, I think it's good sleep hygiene, getting rid of devices. There's supplements. So we've mentioned supplements, things like magnesium, very important in good sleep. Alcohol's always going to be problematic. Stimulants, caffeines are problematic. And sometimes it's just very difficult to, after a busy day when you've got lots going on, very difficult to slow yourself down. So I find reading's very good for me. Sit there, give myself 20 minutes of reading. Make sure it's a really boring book, and then you then you're gone, sort of thing. So I think that it's very much around your process for sleeping. Now, for some people, I think taping the mouth up could be part of that process, but for a lot of people, I don't think it is. I don't think that. Again, for example, we've both got beards at the moment. I know mine sort of appears and disappears intermittently, but that causes problems. Like people with eczema as well, it's not going to be that good for them. People with skin irritations. People with anxiety may be problematic for. So yeah, I would not. It is a very specific tool for a finite number of people in the broader set of tools for better sleep.
Yeah, and I think that that's a nice point as well. So in terms of what we've covered today, there seems to be a lack of academic evidence behind this. Mm-hmm. It's very sparse support academically for it. the people who this may be beneficial for is a relatively small percentage of the population, those who don't have underlying health conditions, and essentially people where, they're high performance anyway. So, they're very fit, they're very active, and there may be some marginal improvement for those people. But it's this idea that everyone should be doing it that we're probably taking umbrage with. And this quite general advice when actually, there isn't that level of evidence. It might be harmful for some people, or that it just might be in effect, or have little to no effect for a large percent of the population as well. Would you say that's kind of where we're at the moment?
Yeah, I think the biggest signal is with snoring. And again, if someone was a snorer and all of a sudden you reduce that by 2/3, the energy someone could feel for the day could be significant. So there's an example where it's significant. But beyond that, there's very little evidence. And even the snoring paper was a small subset of individuals. So, but like I said, I'm agnostic to it. I'm open to new research. I don't own a mouth taping company myself. I will not be buying one in the future. but yeah, let's see where it goes.
Well, I can't imagine it's a particularly expensive item to manufacture. So maybe it's something we do consider, and we just turn this into a very mouth taping platform, and we really sort of like push it out. So at the moment, it's not something you're going to be taking on. It's not something that you're advising our members to do. It's something that I'm coming around to the idea of. Now you're talking about sort of who fits that criteria, but I don't know if I want to make my nighttime routine any more stressful than it needs to be. So I'm probably still siding on the side of not taping my mouth shut during the evening.
I'm looking forward to you shaving a little sort of space through your beard. I know that's when you've started. Maybe that's what you do, Alex. Maybe you do a week and then we'll have a comeback and you'll tell me I'm talking nonsense.
Well, maybe that is the experiment. Maybe that is the control. It's just me doing it and then not doing it. We measure
telling me why I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, I think that's a nice point to bring things to a close. So yeah, thanks for that insight, Stu. Appreciate your time as always.
Cheers, Alex.